All right. Did you tune in to hear the election results from last night? Well, if you are a Republican, you might want to not listen to this. If you're a Democrat, you have a lot to celebrate today. I will say that the Republicans definitely have a lot of lessons to learn. I've been talking about this for some time on my channel, so we're about to dive right into it. I'm J.R. Dukes, your host. I welcome all you free-minded individuals, and we're going to dive right into it right now.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the post-game show. After a big election night, coast to coast, we've got some results.
Yeah, you were in Virginia yesterday interviewing Governor Youngkin, and things did not go as he had hoped.
No, indeed. And so what we're going to do, sit back, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and we're going to explain it all. Let's start over at the big board and Lawrence Jones. Let's start in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Okay, good morning, family. It was a big upset for the governor there. Not only did he lose the House, but they were not able to flip the Senate. Let's look at the map right here. You got Democrats at 51 to the Republicans 47. And when you go over to the House, can we switch? And then you got 21 Democrats there in the Senate and then 17 Republicans in the...
Couple quick notes. The host on Fox News this morning, if you look at their faces, which we'll see it again here in a second, they do not look like they're in a good mood. They look rather disheveled and tired, to put it bluntly. In Virginia, the governor there, the Youngkin is his name, was hoping that the voters in Virginia would deliver him a state Senate and a state House that would help him pass an agenda that he wanted to put forward for the people. Obviously, that is not meant to be.
In the Senate there. The big upset was one thing particular. When it comes to abortion, Republicans just weren't able to rally. Also, when you look at the issues such as crime and everything, they weren't able to run on that. When you look at also, the Democrats outspent the Republicans there. And when it comes to early voting, the Democrats really pounded the pavement there, guys.
They did indeed, Lawrence.
Yeah, a lot at stake. In Virginia, that was really a loss for the governor. And he traveled all over that state to all the different districts. They spent a ton of money trying to get the Republicans to win in both of those establishments. But the no abortion ban, I mean, I think that's what the voters said. What did he want, Brian? He wanted 18 weeks. Is that right, the governor?
I think 15 weeks. 15. And he also said, flip the House, keep the Senate. But he lost both. What an epic failure by Governor Youngkin.
Man, that is putting it mildly. An epic failure. That's exactly what I would call this, especially in Virginia, but really all of the elections that we're about to talk about. The governor there had hopes of running, at least quiet whispers, of running late in the game, so to speak, against President Donald Trump for the nomination for the Republican Party. But that is simply not going to happen, especially in light of this catastrophic failure that is seen as a failure on the part of the governor here in Virginia. So he's kind of a darling to many people. He won election in a heavily Democratic state. It used to be a Republican stronghold. It turned Democratic some time ago, and it's been Democratic ever since, except for when Youngkin was elected. If you remember, he was elected back when they were hammering parents at the school board, and he stood up and said enough, and as a result of that, he was elected. We're going to talk about it here in a minute, but this abortion issue is very serious. I've been talking about it for months. I've really been talking about it since the last election in 2022. Despite the failures of Joe Biden, despite the economy, despite what he did in Afghanistan, despite the wars going on in the Ukraine, the wars in Israel, Gaza, it's really sad. But despite all of his failings, this single issue of abortion has motivated people, especially women, to come out and vote on a single issue basis. To my knowledge, it's never been done before in American history. It sure has not been done in modern American history. But this abortion issue is something very serious, and the Republicans better get it right, and they better understand this, or they're going to get their rear ends handed to them this next year. I sure hope that doesn't happen, but let's see if they get the message. Let's continue.
Huge loss for him, who everyone looked at, if not 24, which I thought was a long shot, definitely 28.
But that's a tough state to win in, though, because you have equal amount of Republicans and Democrats. And when we went there, when Governor Youngkin was running, I remember people were really angry. They did not want him to win on the Democratic side. We were standing outside of a grocery store asking people as they came out, either they loved him or they were completely against him.
Well, Well, Virginia, for the most part, has been a bluish state, and it just got a lot bluer. And, the number one most motivating factor was the issue of abortion in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because
he's exactly right. The Republicans still don't really want to hear this message. As this video continues, you're going to see and you're going to hear some pushback from some of the other hosts, and you'll see what I'm talking about. He's trying to point out clearly that, hey, this abortion issue is something we better pay attention to. Let's continue and see what you think.
Well, Glenn Youngkin was trying to come up with a moderate approach. Okay, let's say 15 weeks, and then it would be a ban. And we should point out that wasn't on the agenda. That wasn't actually on the ballot. But if you elect all these Republicans, I can get this done. It seemed like a moderate thing, but unfortunately for him, the people very loudly said, you know what? Not interested in that, Lawrence.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the ground game worked. Doesn't look like the early voting initiative that they said they were doing there worked. And it was a big upset there. Let's go to Ohio, because that was also a big thing right there. When you look at the Republican, this is what was posted on there, provided the state the Constitution right to make and carry out one's productive decision. Let's take a look at what it said. So 56%, 0.3% said yes, and 43.7% said no. So that was a big one.
I hate to keep interrupting, but I'm hoping that's what you tune in for, is to hear me give you commentary as we go through these particular stories. 56%, that's a pretty good margin. That's a healthy margin, especially in a state like Ohio, who traditionally has been a Republican stronghold. There's been some back and forth, but for the most part, that is a sound defeating that the Democrats can definitely enjoy today. I want to be very clear about something. As I talked about in a recent video, 85% of the American voters, make sure you understand that, 85% of American voters want some type of abortion access. Now, it runs the gamut. It runs everywhere from basically a 5-week standard all the way to where basically you can have abortion upon demand through the day of birth. Which sounds crazy, but I'm just letting you know what the spectrum is. 85% of people that are voters here in the United States want some type of abortion access. And the Republicans better wake up to this, or they are going to be soundly defeated this next year, which is extremely, extremely concerning. Let me know what you think. You agree with me? Put it in the comments below. What else can this be? What else explains this, considering the economy and everything else that's going on? I'm interested to know what you think. Let's get back into it.
One as well. It looks like abortion was the big issue for the folks out there. Also, when you look at the Midwest, Republicans just aren't doing a good job of getting people to turn out. And it looks like they focus on this economic message, but the voters just aren't buying it.
No Senate seat up, no governor's seat up. This big issue was up. And here we are, 2 years after the Dobbs decision, and the Republicans have no idea how to message it. And 2 years after the Dobbs decision, they're still getting outraised.
Remember, the Dobbs decision was the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court that essentially overturned Roe v. Wade, which was the 1970s decision, which essentially legalized abortion in the United States. So I just wanted to give you some context.
By Democrats in every major election and every major issue.
How do Republicans figure this out? Because we heard Nikki Haley on the stage. She said, I'm not for abortion. My husband was adopted. I had a tough time getting pregnant. However, the chances of us changing this are null and void. It's not going to happen. Let's be realistic about it. And then she said, and let's don't vilify women if they've made that decision, or doctors.
If you look at their faces, you can tell they're all very concerned. I agree with what this particular reporter is saying. And I agree to some degree with Nikki Haley. She's been kind of on the fringe of this. She's been saying that we better get with it or we are going to have a problem over this abortion issue. And she is exactly right, but they need to be more forceful and they need to come right out and say it. I did a story on another interview involving former President Donald Trump. I believe he gets it, and I hope he is listening to me or somebody, some way, somehow. He did when was that? About a month ago, he did an interview with a liberal reporter, And he did not take the bait when it comes to some of the questions she was asking. And he was very direct, saying, I don't want to make abortion illegal. What I want to do is essentially be a referee between the states, between the feds, whatever, and come to a consensus on something that we all can live with, whether that's a state-by-state solution or a federal solution. He no longer advocated a ban. However, he does want to help basically be an arbiter and find a way to find common ground for everybody. So we'll just have to see how it pans out. Let's continue.
To have made that decision or don't want to perform them.
Sure. Ultimately, it comes down to the question of abortion. And Americans, as we have seen, once again, the predominant issue across the board was abortion. People don't want restrictions on it. And even though Glenn Youngkin in the Commonwealth of Virginia tried to come up with a common sense approach, a moderate approach, it did not work. And in Ohio, they were simply trying to approve a measure to build in protections, and people didn't want that. And that number you just showed, Lawrence, is about the same margin that recreational weed passed in Ohio.
Yeah, so Ainsley, also when you look at the CNN polling, it says 68% said that the abortion issue was extremely or very important, and only 32% said that it was moderate or not important.
It's nearly 7 in 10. Republicans have to figure out.
Have you noticed how that closely resembles the 85% figure? It's not exact, obviously, but 68, 70% versus 85%. It's what I was just talking about. There is a strong majority of the country that wants some type of abortion access. The conservatives have been throwing themselves around the banner of we're going to save lives, we're going to help people have children. I don't advocate for abortion, just so we're very clear. I don't like abortion. To me, it's not about abortion. To me, it's about rights and people's rights and people's individual rights. And I think individuals should make decisions for themselves. When they stand before God, they can give an account for what they did or did not do. But I digress. I want to stay focused on the issue. 85% of the Americans see it the way that I see it, and I consider myself a rather conservative individual. We're back into it now.
What their messaging is, like Brian was saying, in order to go forward in the next election. We looked at this midterm election as a way to gauge how Republicans or how Democrats react going forward for 2024. So Republicans need to look at all of these numbers and really think about what's more important. Yes, most people that are Republicans are probably pro-life, and we love our babies, and I love being a mother, but what's most important? Republicans taking over and Republicans being able to keep our country.
Well, the other thing that's important is they didn't message crime. They didn't message the border. They have not touched the inner city. So whatever people are, however the mayors are failing, however the issues are falling short, whether it's the bail reform or whether it's the lack of police officers on the street, nothing was emphasized or matters.
Okay, this is where Republicans get in the ditch. And I like this guy, by the way. They listen to a reporter like this, and the reporter says, oh, we didn't message right. We didn't talk about crime. We didn't talk about the inner cities. We didn't talk about border security. We've all been talking about these things. Most Americans, overwhelming majority of Americans, are very familiar, at least in part, with what's going on. If they keep this type of attitude that this particular reporter is talking about, saying, hey, we have to repackage this better, we have to talk more about the inner cities, if that happens, Joe Biden's going to be president again. I hope that we all wake up, that all Republicans wake up and we say, hey, we better turn this ship around because it's called the Titanic and we're about to hit an iceberg.
As much as that, or people are just staying home. The Republicans have a lot to work with. They're just not working with it.
Well, but ultimately it comes down to the Democrats have a really potent issue, and that is abortion, because, ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, pretty much every time the Democrats have run on abortion, they have won. And here's the bad, and was last night a harbinger for 2024, as you were alluding to, Ainsley? Absolutely. You know why? Because there are opponents and proponents trying to put abortion rights on the ballots in the states of Florida, Nevada, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. So it's going to be, if you're a Republican running in those states, you're going to have a tough 2024.
So one of the states that Republicans would push back on is the state of Mississippi. They ran on abortion.
This is what I am so glad I get the opportunity to tell you about. This guy's just wrong. Sure, that's the only bright spot, is that the Republicans were able to hang on to Mississippi. Hello, Mississippi. Of course, it's a strong family values, quote unquote, family values Republican stronghold. If the Republicans lost Mississippi, that would be news in and of itself. Having said that, we're going to get into it here in a minute. The percentage of victory was very small, even for Mississippi. Again, extremely concerning. Yes, Republicans won one election, but this guy better get with the program and understand what's going on.
That was the one issue. And Governor Tate Reeves was able to get 51.8% of the vote. Why is this important? 40% of the black individuals that live in that state is 40% of the state. This is the
Okay. Just like I was saying, the margin of victory was only 1.8%. And this is in a very conservative Mississippi. It does have a 40% black population, which I knew they had a heavy black population, but I did not know it was 40%. Having said that, even with the 40% black percentage, they were able to just squeak out what normally is a much more comfortable margin. Obviously, most black voters end up voting Democratic, but that might not be the case coming up this next year in the presidential election. But we'll just have to see. I can tell you this, if we don't get this right on abortion, it's going to be bad news.
largest state for black voters there, and they really thought they were going to get black voters to show up for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
As you know, Mississippi has a water issue, a crime issue, an economic issue, and black voters did not show up.
And that's the hospital issue, too. A lot of the hospitals had to shut down in the rural areas.
They didn't show up
That's
for him.
Elvis Presley's cousin. I thought maybe that would help him. Maybe it did a little bit.
He's all shook up.
Yeah.
All where Mississippi's getting better is education.
Yeah.
They're starting to turn it around on education, and maybe that has something to do with it. Extremely Republican state, so that was supposed to be closer than it actually was.
But that is a state where abortion was not an issue because they were both anti-abortion.
That's
so
exactly right.
Wherever abortion was on the agenda, the Democrats won.
Brandon,
See, there we go. That's exactly what I've been talking about. This guy gets it. This reporter understands if we don't get this abortion thing turned around and get the Republican position clearly identified and make sure that voters understand the Republicans stand with them and 85% of the country, and that we would like to have some kind of safe, legal alternative to what's going on right now, that's the law of the land, then the Democrats are going to have a good year next year. I hope I'm wrong, but we're going to have to wait and see. All right, let's check out this video here of CBS This Morning.
Elections and campaign correspondent Robert Costa to break it all down. He's back in his native environment of Washington, D.C. Bob, good morning. It's good to see you here yesterday, but I can't wait to hear what you have to say about these results. Abortion played a big role in both Virginia and Ohio. It seemed to energize voters. What does that mean for Republicans trying to win next year?
Tony, my Republican sources say they are nervous about how abortion rights is going to play in 2024. Ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, now Republicans are grappling with what do they do here moving forward. After 2022, they got pushed back by the Democrats, pushed back again in 2023. And you can expect some campaigns in battleground states not to talk about this issue as much, to try to steer the conversation to the economy and other issues in the coming year.
Talk to me about...
Unfortunately, if they do exactly what this reporter just said and Republicans try to steer the conversation away from abortion and they start talking about the economy and everything else, again, unfortunately, the Republicans are going to have a terrible year next year. They're going to end up losing over this abortion issue. It's unprecedented in my mind. I've never seen a single issue dominate, especially when it's put up against the economy. You used to always be, it's the economy, stupid. That used to be the mantra. Apparently, that does not apply when it comes to abortion rights.
Virginia, Bob, if you could. So Glenn Youngkin, popular governor, Republican, but he's unable to consolidate a Republican legislature behind him. What does that tell you about the direction of that state and the country?
Governor Youngkin put his political capital on the line. He put his face out there as the front of the Republican Party in Virginia, hoping to really win the state Senate and the legislature there. He didn't. Democrats had big wins in Virginia. That pushes Youngkin back as someone who might run for president in 2024, and it makes him part of the conversation for 2028. But this is someone in Virginia who was a rising Republican.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is the end of Youngkin's political presidential ambitions for this current run. But we'll see how it goes. But I think that I am spot on as what this reporter was talking about. He's not going to be able to get any momentum from this and launch a presidential campaign.
Republican star was being encouraged to run, and now that talk is pretty muted.
Okay, so another thing I want to make sure I point out that's not getting much attention from the press is marijuana. That is something else that was on the ballot in Ohio to memorialize it as part of constitutional law for the state of Ohio, and it passed. It passed overwhelmingly. Again, you have what normally is a liberal issue, a conservative issue with clearly distinct lines. Generally speaking, the Republicans don't want anything to do with marijuana. It's a drug. It's terrible. We need to do away with it, and we need to lock everybody up that pulls out a joint. Democrats obviously take the opposite view. And even conservative individuals such as myself, I will tell you, I don't participate in drugs simply because I choose not to. Having said that, I do believe if people want to smoke and light up a joint, that's their business. The government, me, no one else should be telling anybody else how to live their life. That's just my opinion, and obviously a vast majority of Americans share the same opinion that I have. And that is evidenced because you have a place like Ohio that's traditionally pretty conservative, and we're going to get into it right now because you're going to see exactly what happened with this marijuana initiative.
Priscilla, let's touch on another issue here. It didn't get as much attention as abortion, but in Ohio, we have the legalization of recreational marijuana, the 24th state to do that. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, and this, by the way, has to be said. This is not medicinal marijuana like they have here in Florida, and Governor DeSantis is trying to undo that or make it very difficult to have access to medical marijuana. I use medical in quotes for a specific purpose. These people here, the voters in Ohio, said, forget all the medical stuff. We want marijuana, period, a.k.a. recreationally. And that's exactly what they passed. And look at these numbers, 57%. I generally consider 60% to be a blowout because it's hard to get anybody at 60% when they vote on something to agree. So 2.183 million people voted for recreational marijuana. That's generally a tough sell, but not anymore. And Republicans better get the memo, or they are going to pay next year.
Yeah, Joe, it's huge because this is a state that is considered conservative, red-leaning, that has voted to legalize marijuana, with 57% of voters making that choice and voting in favor of that. And again, it may be a lesson on messaging, because what the advocates for that said was that this is just like alcohol and we should regulate it and we should tax it just like alcohol. And as I was at the polls yesterday talking to folks, a lot of people seem to agree with that. Now, that's not to say that this is working everywhere. We saw last year in Oklahoma a measure like this failed, but it is going to be on the ballot in 2024 in a number of those kinds of states, Florida, Nebraska, South Dakota, among others. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out there as well.
So, as I've been saying, this medical marijuana, this recreational marijuana situation is a serious thing that the Republicans better consider. Otherwise, just like the abortion issue, they are going to come up short in next year's election. You have all these people that showed up to vote yesterday. They're going to show up again in 2024, approximately 1 year from today. And if Republicans do not get the messaging straight on marijuana and on abortion, I have a feeling it's going to be a terrible day for Republicans. I want to take a look at this next screen that I've pulled up for you. This is pretty well a recap of what is important and what you need to know. So, live election results, top races to watch. All right, so we have Ohio issue 1, which is the right to abortion. A yes vote would amend the state constitution to give individuals the right to an abortion. Passed by 56.6 in a rather conservative leaning state. Boom. 95% of the votes are in on this statistic. Ohio, issue number 2, legalize marijuana. A yes vote would legalize recreational marijuana for people 21 years and older. It passed by 57% with 95% of the vote in. In Kentucky, you have an upset. You have the Democrat beating it's at 2.5%. That's still a pretty sound beating. Generally speaking, Kentucky is rather a conservative state, as we all know. It is what it is. Again, abortion, a very central theme in that election. And then, of course, they are talking about the Mississippi governor's race, which was won by Republican Reeves, 51.6%. So 1.6% was the margin of victory in a very red Mississippi. I don't know if it gets any redder than Mississippi. That should be a serious wake-up call for all Republicans, for everybody that is concerned about what's going on right now in the world and in our country. We'll have to see exactly how this all pans out. I sincerely hope, I sincerely pray that somebody out there is listening. Somebody that is in the Republican Party, somebody wake up. Listen, I can make videos, I can talk, do whatever I'm doing here. I'm doing everything that I know to do to try to make a difference, to try to let everybody know, hey, this is going on. You need to think about it yourself. You need to put it through your own brain and make your own choices, your own decisions. But I can only do so much. I encourage you to study these subjects yourself. Study the platforms of each party yourself. See what's going on in this woke world we live in. Reach out to your senators, your representatives, the people in your community. We need to get together and get the abortion issue right. We need to make sure that there are both abortions that are legal, that are safe. Bill Clinton said it a long time ago, and I'm not normally a person to go around quoting former President Bill Clinton, but he did say something that I think I agree with. He said an abortion should be rare, safe, and legal. And for the most part, I agree with that. There have been too many women from a long time ago that ended up having to have an abortion for one reason or another, and because it was illegal, they ended up dying. I am here to tell you that I had a great-grandmother back in the 1940s that actually had an illegal abortion because abortions were not legal. They were definitely frowned upon. There was no legal way to have a safe abortion, and she ended up dying from it. Now, it's real easy to judge people back in history. It's easy to judge people that are doing bad things and saying they deserve it or whatever thing you want to tell yourself. The reality is you don't know unless you're in someone's shoes. My great-grandmother, from what I've been told at the time, she already had 4 kids. It was Arkansas. It was a very poor time in America. The state itself has always been rather poor. It was definitely poor back then. They literally did not know where their next meal was coming from, and having another mouth to feed was a serious problem for the family. And of course, this was before contraceptives were available, such as the pill for women to take control of their own health care. So it's easy to judge people from 80, 90 years ago, but I'm telling you, you never know unless you're in that situation. And personally, as a father of 4 daughters, I want to make sure that my daughters understand I don't advocate for abortions. Abortion is something you should not have. Having said that, if the need arises in their mind, I want them to have legal, safe access. I think reasonable laws should be passed on abortion. I don't believe you should have abortion the day before birth. At the same time, I don't believe that an 11-year-old girl that's walking down the street and gets raped should be forced by our government to have an abortion. Or, I'm sorry, that she should be forced to have the child instead of receiving an abortion that she needs. There's some people in the Republican Party that would say, oh, this girl needs to have help to raise this child. I mean, that's just nonsense. That's crazy. It makes Republicans look crazy. Nobody advocates for that. I want you to review it and think for yourself. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at reachjrdukes@gmail.com. I always appreciate you tuning in, hearing what I have to say. Please leave me a comment. And remember, if you hit that subscribe button, it brings you 10 years of good luck. If you don't believe me, try it. At any rate, please keep that mind free. Never give up, my friends. I am J.R. Dukes.